two cars changed American culture, then vanished for over 30 years. Ed Big Daddy Roth built rolling science fiction, the Orbitron, the Mysterion, machines so impossible-looking that other builders stopped and stared. One sat abandoned in front of a sex shop in Mexico. The other was stripped to nothing. Nobody knew where they were for decades. These weren't just show cars. They were the engineering blueprints for an entire generation's idea of what a car could be. In the next 20 minutes, you'll get the full story, where both cars went and how one came back. WHO was Ed Roth before we get to the cars. You need to understand the man. Ed Roth was born in 1932 in Beverly Hills, California. His parents were German immigrants. Nothing fancy, nothing special about his childhood. After high school, he joined the United States Air Force. He was stationed in Morocco at a remote tracking station, far from California, far from everything he knew. When he came back home, Roth did what most guys did back then. He settled into ordinary life. He married his high school sweetheart, a woman named Sally. They started a family. He found work at Sears, designing store displays and dressing mannequins. Not exactly the story of a legend, but Roth had something most people at Sears did not have. He had a talent. In his driveway, after work, he would take out his brushes and paint flames onto local hot rods. He charged $4 a car. That was it. $4. But people loved what he did. Word started to spread. By 1957, Roth partnered with two men, Bud Crozier and Tom Kelly, and they opened a custom paint shop together. They called it the Crazy Painters. Flames, scallops, wild color combinations. If it had wheels, Roth wanted to paint it. But painting was only the beginning. In 1959, Roth left the Crazy Painters and opened his own shop, and it was in that shop, alone, with fiberglass and plaster and a vision nobody else had, that he began building something that would change his life forever. The car was called the Outlaw. At first glance, it looked like nothing anyone had ever seen. Most hot rods back then followed a simple formula. Take a 1927 Ford T-Bucket, drop in a big engine, make it go fast. That was the hot rod recipe. Everybody followed it. Roth threw the recipe away. Instead of steel, he used fiberglass. He sculpted the body completely by hand, building shapes out of plaster and wood before creating molds. The finished car sat on a custom chrome chassis. Under the hood was a modified Cadillac V8 engine topped with 4 carburetors. It looked futuristic. It looked alien. It looked completely outrageous. And that was exactly the point. When the Outlaw was finished in late 1959, it became a sensation almost overnight. Show promoters started paying Roth to display it. Crowds gathered around it at every event. Car magazines rushed to feature it. The January 1960 issue of Carcraft magazine put the Outlaw directly on its cover. Ed Roth had arrived. And then came the partnership that turned a garage builder into a national celebrity. A model company called Revell had noticed what was happening. Plastic model kits had exploded in popularity across America. Kids were spending their allowance money building miniature hot rods in their bedrooms. Revell wanted in. A model designer named Jim Keller pitched the idea of producing a scale model of Roth's Outlaw. The executives at Revell were immediately fascinated. The deal was made. Revell turned Roth's custom cars into national products, and the Revell publicist named Henry Blankfort gave Roth something else, a brand new identity, Big Daddy. The nickname matched Roth's massive 6'4" frame and his larger-than-life personality perfectly. Blankfort even encouraged Roth to wear a tuxedo and top hat at public appearances. It became his trademark look. Suddenly, Roth was not just a customizer anymore. He was a celebrity, and his next 2 creations would become the most talked-about cars he ever built. The year was 1963. Roth was at the top of his game. Every car he built generated magazine covers. Every show he attended drew massive crowds. His model kits were selling all over the country. He decided to build something that nobody had ever attempted before. 2 engines, not 1, 2. The car was called the Mysterion. Roth used 2 big block Ford V8 engines side by side, tilted at angles to fit inside the chassis. The frame was thin-walled. The body was hand-sculpted fiberglass, just like all his other creations. But this time, Roth pushed the design further than ever before. The Mysterion had an asymmetrical body, meaning one side did not match the other. It had an oblong grille, a strange, odd-shaped nosepiece, one large headlight on the left side, mounted in its own pod, a smaller, more conventional light on the right. Nothing matched. Nothing was supposed to. On top, a hydraulically operated bubble, a clear dome that rose and fell at the push of a button. Inside, shag carpet, a television set, a Kragar steering wheel, a Moon gas pedal, a Hurst shifter. The painter Larry Watson coated the entire car in gold Murano candy over white pearl. Even the chassis was chromed. Every single piece of metal you could see had been polished or plated. Automotive journalist Ken Gross later described Roth as a futurist, a man whose imagination pushed far beyond traditional hot rodding. And with the Mysterion, that was more true than it had ever been. There was just one problem. The Mysterion never actually ran. It was a show car, built to look at, built to make people stop in their tracks and stare with their mouths open, but the engine was never properly tuned to drive it down the road. Roth knew this. He didn't care. The car was doing its job. He took the Mysterion to show after show across the country. Crowds packed around it wherever it went. Magazine covers, again. Revel turned it into another model kit. Kids all over America built miniature versions of the twin-engine monster on their bedroom floors. Ed Roth had done it again, and then he made a decision that would seal the Mysterion's fate. He rented it out. A man named Bob Larrivee was a car show promoter. He ran shows all over the United States. He approached Roth with an offer. "Let me take the Mysterion on a full tour. I'll handle everything. You'll get paid." Roth agreed. Larrivee took the Mysterion on the road, show after show, city after city. The car kept drawing crowds everywhere it went, but somewhere along the way something went wrong. Larrivee was hauling the Mysterion to another show when he noticed something alarming. The frame had started to crack. Think about what that means. Two massive, heavy engines sitting inside a thin-walled chassis. All that weight. All those miles on a trailer. City after city. The stress had finally become too much. The frame was cracking. Larrivee took the engines apart. He removed the crankshafts and the pistons, the most valuable mechanical parts, and set them aside. Then he called Ed Roth and told him what had happened. Roth told him one thing: "Pay me for the damage, and I will come pick it up." Larrivee never paid. Roth never came to pick it up. And the Mysterion, the greatest car Ed Roth had ever built, sat broken and ignored in a shop in Kansas City, Missouri. A man named Ray Farner owned the shop. A person named Doug Wright came in one day and saw the car sitting against the wall. Just sitting there. Broken frame. Engine stripped. Show career over. Ray told Doug the story. The tour was finished. Roth only wanted the front and rear axles shipped back to him. He did not care about the rest. He did not care about the rest. The greatest car of the custom car golden age. And its creator did not care about the rest. The axles were shipped back to California. The remaining pieces of the Mysterion were parted out, broken up, scattered. The original Mysterion no longer exists. There is no barn somewhere waiting to be discovered. There is no dusty garage with the twin-engine body sitting under a tarp. The car is gone. It was destroyed by the people who were supposed to take care of it. For decades, fans refused to believe it. Rumors would surface. Somebody spotted something in Tulsa, Oklahoma that looked like the Mysterion's rear quarter panel. Somebody else knew a guy who knew a guy. The internet made things worse. Wrong information, false leads, hopeful stories that led nowhere. The Mysterion was never found, because there is nothing left to find. But one man refused to accept that. His name was Jeffrey A. Jones. Jones had been a Mysterion fanatic since he was a kid. He was a petroleum engineer by profession, a man who spent his career solving difficult technical problems, and he decided to apply those same skills to the greatest mystery in custom car history. He wanted to build a Mysterion, not a rough copy, not an approximation, an exact replica, bolt by bolt, built exactly the way Roth built the original in 1963. There was just one problem. There were no blueprints, no design drawings, no specifications, nothing. Ed Roth had built the Mysterion purely by eye. He sculpted it freehand, the way an artist paints a canvas. He never wrote anything down. Jones started from almost nothing. The only helpful sources he could find were a Revel 125 scale model kit, the cover of the September 1963 issue of Rod and Custom magazine, a 1965 school library book about car customizing, a single article in Car Model magazine from October 1964. That was it. That was all he had to work with. Jones spent years tracking down facts, hunting down photographs, calling people who had been there. He interviewed everyone who was still alive and had seen the original car. He measured the model kit obsessively. He compared photographs from different angles. And then he started building. He used the same technique Roth had used. Fiberglass laid into plaster molds, sculpted by hand. He built the twin-engine setup the same way. He sourced correct period parts. The result was remarkable. A full, drivable recreation of a car that no longer exists, built from nothing but photographs, a scale model, and one man's obsession. Jones wrote a book about the entire process. He called it Ed Roth's Mysterion, the genesis, demise, and recreation of an iconic custom car. He put everything he had found into that book, the real story of how the Mysterion was built, what happened to it, and how he brought it back. The Mysterion replica later sold at auction for a six-figure price, but the original is still gone, and it always will be. Now we come to the second car, and this one has a very different ending. The year was 1964, 1 year after the Mysterion. Roth was building again. This time, he wanted to make something that looked like it came from outer space. The car was called the Orbitron. Roth designed it alongside a man named Ed Newton, who everyone called Newt. Newton was Roth's designer, and he had a very specific vision for this car. He wanted it to look like a slingshot dragster crossed with a spacecraft. The body was fiberglass again, but the front end was unlike anything Roth had ever built. The nose of the Orbitron was asymmetrical. One side did not match the other. And in that strange asymmetrical nose, Roth installed 3 headlights, not the same color. 3 different colors, one red, one green, one blue. The idea was unusual. Roth had been thinking about color television, a new technology at the time. He knew that red, green, and blue light combined together could create pure white, so he built that into the front of his car. When all 3 headlights were turned on at once and aimed at the same spot, they would combine into a single white beam. On top, a clear plexiglass bubble, like the Beatnik Bandit, but even more extreme. Inside, faux fur lining. A television set, a Kragar steering wheel, a Moon gas pedal, a Hurst shifter, a tachometer. Under the hood was a 1955 Chevrolet Vate engine, and as strange as this sounds, Roth considered the Orbitron one of his worst creations. Not because of the design, because of the hood. The hood was fiberglass, and because the inside of the fiberglass was raw and unfinished, Roth kept it permanently closed, which meant nobody could see the engine. And Roth had spent enormous time and money chroming that engine. It looked incredible, but nobody could see it. Roth always regretted that decision. He said later that covering the engine was the reason the Orbitron failed at shows. But the Orbitron did appear on the cover of Carcraft magazine in 1964, and it became a Revel model kit, another miniature version of a Roth creation sitting on the shelves of hobby shops across America. And then Roth sold it. In 1967, Roth sold the Orbitron to a man named Darrell Starbird for $750. $750. Starbird was a well-known figure in the custom car world. He was sometimes called the Bubble Top King because of his own creations, which featured similar clear dome designs. He bought the Orbitron planning to use it in his own traveling car show. And after that, the trail goes cold. At some point, Starbird sold the Orbitron to an unknown collector in Texas. The name of that collector has never been confirmed. Starbird himself later said he could not remember who he sold it to. From Texas, the Orbitron changed hands again, somehow, and nobody knows exactly how. It ended up being sold to a carnival owner in Ciudad Juárez, Mexico, around 1991. By the time it arrived in Mexico, the asymmetrical nose had been cut off. Just cut off and thrown away. The most recognizable feature of the entire car, gone, probably because someone needed better airflow to the engine when they were driving it around at carnivals. The bubble top was destroyed sometime in the early 1970s. The story goes that someone got trapped inside when it got stuck. The only way to get them out was to break the bubble. Gone. The television was gone. The fur lining was gone. The tachometer was gone. The car was spray-painted flat black. Not restored, not carefully recoated, just sprayed over in flat black primer. And then it was parked in front of an adult bookstore in Ciudad Juárez, Mexico, and used as a dumpster. One of the most celebrated custom cars in American history. A car that had been on magazine covers, that had been turned into a model kit sold to children across the country, was sitting on a street in northern Mexico being used as a trash can. For over 30 years, nobody knew where it was. Now we get to the man who found it. His name was Michael Lightbourne. People in the classic car world called him the West Texas Scout. Lightbourne had a talent that is almost impossible to explain. He had an eye for lost cars. He would hear a rumor, a vague mention of an old vehicle sitting somewhere, and he would follow that rumor for months, sometimes years, until he found something, or found nothing. And then he would start over. He had tracked down several historically significant cars that experts had given up on. The kind of finds that make other collectors stop and stare the way those crowds had once stared at Roth's cars. Lightbourne had heard rumors. Somewhere in northern Mexico, people were saying there was an old show car. Nobody knew exactly what it was. Nobody had seen it up close. Just rumors, secondhand information, the kind of tip that most people would ignore. Lightborn did not ignore it. He made phone calls. He drove. He asked questions in places where nobody expected an American car hunter to show up asking questions. And eventually, he found it. Parked in front of that adult bookstore in Ciudad Juárez. Flat black paint. Missing nose. Missing bubble. Being used as a dumpster. But it was the Orbitron. Despite everything, the missing parts, the spray paint, the decades of neglect, the car was still mostly intact. The original Chevrolet V8 engine was still there. The chrome Astro wheels were still on it. Most of the body was still there. Lightborn knew exactly what he was looking at. But getting it back was not simple. The family that owned the bookstore had also owned the carnival that had brought the car to Mexico. They had sentimental feelings about it. It was connected to their family history, to memories of the carnival business. They did not want to sell. Think about that. They were using it as a dumpster, but they did not want to sell it. Lightborn had a conversation with the owner that cut straight to the point. If this car means so much to your family, why are you letting people use it as a trash can? If you truly care about it, shouldn't it be somewhere safe? Shouldn't it be restored? It took more than a year. Lightborn came back. He negotiated. He pushed. He waited. Finally, the family agreed to sell. Lightborn loaded the Orbitron onto a trailer and headed back to the United States. When he crossed the border, the customs agents laughed at the old wreck sitting on his trailer. They had no idea what they were looking at. He knew. Back in the United States, word spread quickly through the collector community. The Orbitron had been found. A man named Bo Buchman heard the news and moved fast. Buchman was the president of Galpin Auto Sports, a well-known operation in California that had been famous for building and restoring custom vehicles. Buchman was also a longtime fan of Ed Roth. He owned several other Roth creations. He contacted Lightborn through a Roth friend and show promoter known as Moldy Marvin. A deal was made. Buchman acquired the Orbitron from Lightborn. Now came the hard part. Buchman announced publicly that his goal was to restore the Orbitron to its exact original condition, without making it look too perfect. He wanted it to look the way it had looked in 1964, not a shiny new replica. The actual car brought back. People in the custom car world were watching. Some were skeptical. This was not just a restoration. This was archaeology. Buchman assembled a team, and then he did something remarkable. He found the people who had originally built the car. Ed Newton. The designer who had worked with Roth on the Orbitron back in 1964 was still alive. Newton came in and worked directly with the restoration team, providing details and specifications that existed nowhere in writing. Things only he remembered. Larry Watson, the painter who had originally painted the Orbitron, was also still alive. Watson still had his archive from the Roth years, and in that archive, carefully preserved, was Ed Roth's secret paint formula. The exact colors, the exact process. Joel Perez, who had done the original interior work on the Orbitron in 1964, came back and redid the interior on the restored version. Dave Shutton and a man known as Jimmy C. reproduced the missing nose section, the asymmetrical front end that had been cut off and thrown away in Mexico. They built it back from photographs and the memories of people who had seen the original. The television set inside the cockpit, a specific General Electric model, was tracked down on eBay and replaced with an identical unit. And then, during the restoration, the team found something unexpected. Hidden inside the cockpit was a small tape recorder. And a tape. Nobody knows what is on the tape. Nobody knows who put it there or when. It has become one of the small mysteries attached to this car that may never be fully explained. The restoration was completed in approximately 100 days. On October 18, 2008, the restored Orbitron was unveiled to the public at Galpin Auto Sports. Hot Rod magazine called it the most incredible barn find ever. The car that had been a dumpster in front of a sex shop in Mexico was now under lights, on display, looking exactly the way it had looked when Ed Roth had driven it to Carcraft magazine's cover shoot in 1964. TWO cars, TWO Kates. So here's where we stand. Two cars, both built by the same man, both completed within a year of each other. Both featured on magazine covers. Both turned into model kits that kids built all over America. Both considered among the greatest custom cars ever created. And both gone, but in completely different ways. The Mysterion was destroyed by the people around it. The frame cracked under the weight of two engines. The promoter who rented it never paid the repair bill. The creator decided the axles were the only parts worth keeping. The rest was scattered and lost forever. No rescue. No recovery, no second chapter, just gone. The Orbitron survived by accident. Nobody protected it on purpose. Nobody locked it in a garage to keep it safe. It passed through hand after hand, crossed an international border, spent decades in a country nobody expected to look, got spray-painted and stripped of its most recognizable features. And it still survived, because the body was fiberglass, and the engine was solid, and the frame held together through everything that was done to it. And because one man with a talent for finding lost things followed a rumor into northern Mexico and refused to leave without it. That is the difference between the Mysterion and the Orbitron. One was destroyed by carelessness. One was saved by obsession. What happened to Ed Roth? Ed Roth himself lived long enough to see some of this unfold, but not all of it. By the late 1960s, American culture was shifting fast. Muscle cars were replacing show rods. Rock and roll was getting louder and stranger. The custom car scene that Roth had helped build was changing. Roth shifted with it. He turned his attention toward motorcycles and choppers. He built outrageous custom bikes that had the same wild energy as his show rods. When mainstream motorcycle magazines refused to feature his creations, he started his own magazine. He called it Choppers, because that was Ed Roth. If the existing world would not make room for what he was doing, he built a new world. He worked on movie props. He did museum displays. He took on projects for places like Knott's Berry Farm. He kept working. And then, in the 1980s, something happened that Roth had not expected. People came back. A new generation discovered Ratfink. They discovered the model kits. They discovered the old car magazines with the Beatnik Bandit and the Mysterion and the Orbitron on the covers. The custom culture that had seemed to fade away came back stronger than ever. Roth was suddenly relevant again, not as a relic, as a legend. He spent his final years doing what he had always done, drawing, building, signing posters, attending shows, talking to anyone who wanted to listen. Ed Roth died in April of 2001. He was 69 years old. He never knew that the Orbitron was sitting in front of a sex shop in Mexico. That discovery happened 6 years after his death. He never knew that one day his car would be found, restored by people who had originally helped build it, and unveiled under lights to a crowd that treated it like a piece of American history. Because that is exactly what it is. Ed Roth never followed rules. He built cars that looked impossible. He created characters that parents did not understand. He turned a driveway paint job that paid $4 into a career that changed American culture. The Orbitron still exists. You can see it. Bo Bookman's restoration preserved it exactly as Roth intended. The chrome wheels, the colored headlights, the clear cockpit with the fur lining and the television set, and the hidden tape recorder that nobody has ever explained. The Mysterion is gone, but Jeffrey Jones's replica keeps the car alive. A recreation built from a scale model and a magazine cover, and years of obsessive research by a man who refused to let the greatest custom car in history disappear completely. And somewhere in all of this, in the found cars and the lost cars, in the dusty garages and the Mexican border crossings, in the cracked frames and the secret paint formulas, you can still see exactly who Ed Roth was. He wasn't just a car builder. He was a man who built things that the world had never seen before and will never see again. He built machines that looked like they came from a future that never arrived. And even when those machines disappeared, even when they ended up stripped and painted black and abandoned in a foreign country, they were still his. Still impossible, still outrageous, still completely unlike anything else that has ever existed. Ed Roth didn't just build cars, he built a universe, and some parts of that universe are still out there, waiting to be found.